Quite differently from that. That was just the shape that Miranda created for us, that you did go right from the very early Gemini pioneers all the way to the last man to walk on the moon.
And hearing how they all experienced the journey in different ways, did that alter your perception of how you remembered it at all?
Well, my memory of it was, like, as like a kid, like, like an 11-year-old kid, just like growing up with it, and it was just like, it was just such a kind of like fundamental experience at the end of the 60s, the early 70s. So for me, it was huge, and it was like, and I just kind of felt that, like being a photographer, the great thing about being a photographer and a portrait photographer is that you can meet all these different people that you can like. I don't just like wait for introductions to come in. Like, if I want to meet Muhammad Ali or I want to meet like the Dalai Lama, like I'll make sure that thing happens. So it's like the astronauts were like a fundamental thing for me that that I had to, because I knew that I'd never go out there. And I think there's some point in the film when I spoke to Buzz Aldrin, and like you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that experience of being out there.
Someone said the other day that with your photographs, it's almost like you're seeking out the edges of human experience, the edges of the way people think, the edges of the places people go, the lowest places you can get into. Which I thought was a really interesting observation. So
but but there are places that you want to reach into and to have a place in yourself as well. Of course, I mean that's what it's all about. It's about, like, now. I think I said the other night we had a screening. There was a screening at BAFTA, and I just had this. I just sort of feel now that that the point I've been photographing for 30 years, and fuck how that happened. That's crazy. Like really.
I was filming before you were photographed.
Yeah, you were. Yeah, no, you're a fundamental. You're a fundamental. You're a fundamental as to why that I was a photographer as well, and so Chris as well over here. So the thing is that. But the thing is, it's all about the experience. The most interesting thing in lots and lots and lots of ways is that, and even more lots of ways, is that it's not actually about the photographs anymore. And that can be like, for a lot of people that look at your work and kind of like, they crowd on your work and so they think that's like disappointing, but it's not at all. It's like the most interesting thing is your own personal experience with people. And they're the meetings. It's almost like the pictures are.
How did it feel sort of stirring up their memories? Of your memories, or with your memories?
It's impossible. It's impossible because their memories are like they were the ones that were they were the ones that like Lovell said to me, that Jim Lovell said to me, like he was on Apollo 13 and he said that he was able to put his finger up and just obliterate the Earth, looking out through. Like being in the capsule and looking out and like obliterate the Earth. I mean, just that's got to totally like screw you up. Really, I mean, or at least like make you, maybe not screw you up, but it'll make you like really think harder about what it is that you're actually involved in, because these were just these guys were always these guys were like top at school, top at college, top in the Navy, top test pilots. I mean they were like cocooned. They were cocooned the whole time, so they never had this like. They never had this other sort of special experience that a lot of other people had. The University of Life,
Yeah, there was that quite sad, almost sad sentence. A guy said that was the best that you could get in life was that experience. How does that make you feel?
When I was very interesting for me watching this process. I mean, Steve taking pictures of guys that had taken pictures that they brought back to us. A very sort of weird kind of domino. And I'm sitting in these rooms watching this connection going on. And one of the most extraordinary things for me was, and that I tried to bring into the film, was looking into these astronauts' eyes. And when Steve started to engage them with the past, remembering it, and there was this far-awayness thing that came into the room. And that's when I looked at all the archive now, so that's when I tried to reintroduce that moment of being that young person, just looking out and seeing those things. And so, you know, very low budget film, you know, did it as best as I possibly could. But one of the things that was really important to me was you came away from this experience not feeling the same. You felt actually outside your skin. You felt like human beings are pretty weird, interesting creatures. And their wisdom about, because of this experience, I think, you know, what are we doing, where are we going with our intelligence? What is the future going to hold? Why do we have to move homes? Why do we move flats? Why are we always on the shift? You know, what is our destiny? And it makes a very, very interesting change in yourself. So for me it was a marvellous experience. And it's very interesting because even when you look back at the pictures now, your mind changes about what you think the picture is that you feel strongest about.
Yeah. Well, you change as you look. You know, you can. Well, I mean, that's like editing. But the thing that when you look,
it's from experience through time. You know that you.
Yeah, and how it changes. Yeah.
I was saying earlier that, you know, finishing a film is a bit like when you finish a relationship. There's always things you knew you should have done better afterwards.
Yeah, that's fundamental.
Yeah, so that, you know, that's always interesting every time you watch something. It's very wonderful to be able to replay your own memories.
But they change all the time. They change all the time. They're not like my, you know, my place of like what I remember about like being with like if you think at the back end of this one, you know, Gene's surname, right? So, and you think about that and you see that profile, and then when I revisit those contact shoots, it's like it's every single time it's like something else. There's something else that's like pulled out of it. It's not.
But isn't that amazing? That's because your knowledge is shifting all the time. That's because, you know, you look at a picture and it's never still. People think it's still, but actually, it's not still because.
But your memory's changing as well. So.
Because we're not still.
I think that's the interesting thing though with the combination of photography and filmmaking, is photography being the sort of capturing signposts of history, like you said, and filmmaking, with a film you capture all these little moments that go into that history.
They're very different ways of how we experience seeing, you know. And
with dialogue.
Yeah, and they're very fascinating, and the way a photo can distill something in a most, you know, profound way, and it can be shared and held. But film is different altogether. It's this different way of watching, you know, and I can break this whole film up and make it into a series of different observations in a room, and you could walk around that room and see it differently again.
But the film was like different. The film was a different animal all the way through as well, because it was like it existed.
Oh yeah,
like
so this is 10 years.
2 or 3 different states.
I filmed it 10 years ago. At least is it 10 years ago?
No, 13.
Somebody said the other day you had the same suit on. Not this one. But longer than 10 years ago, and the first cut was a massive sci-fi kind of cut I did. It was all about alienation. And I put a voiceover on it, and actually someone sat with me and said, what is the truth of this piece? It's you watching Steve take this journey. And that was the marvellous Miranda and Beverly there who steered me on this journey. And that's what I pulled out eventually. But it wasn't that I took 10 years to do it, I just dropped into it twice during that period of time. And each time I tried to get anyone to finance it, you know, no one could see what it had, and also maybe my confidence, you know, I couldn't tell them what it was going to be, all that sort of thing.
But that's good. But that's good for what actually, like, you know, what you've all watched tonight, you know, because it would never be the same film. Like, and if, I mean, God forbid, you re-edited it again in like 5 years' time, you know.
It's so different.
That it will be a different, beast again, you know. Like so the film that you would have made straight away after was like different. And this one's different.
Yeah.
You know.
Do any of you have any questions?
Far away.
We've got a few. It's good.
Just what I was wondering, you mentioned you spoke to, we conversed with Jim Lovell, but you didn't have a photograph of him.
Well, I had.
Did you not want to do the...
What?
I didn't film it.
Yeah, Nichola wasn't there.
I I had two raggedy young kids.
I mean, there were
I couldn't get to it all, so I only did those 10 days.
All right.
So there are a number of astronauts and a number of people that, I mean, I did maybe three or four trips to go and to make this series happen, and you were there for one of them, yeah?
I was there for one, and then
the big one.
I was there for 2, 5 days, and then 4.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there was like at different points over the next like year or so.
And the boys were that big, and one of them's up there now. He's 23.
Yeah.
So that's quite a change. Yeah. Yeah.
So so the story is like, I mean, the series of pictures was originally, the idea was it was going to be like a book, that it was going to make a book, and we never really thought about a film. But then we suddenly did, and we thought like, well, this would be an amazing thing for you to.
I know. I don't even remember thinking about it like that. All that lit.
It was really open, really open.
All that lit it up at the beginning was this burning desire to connect with something that I had seen, you had seen. I think millions of people, more people than X Factor probably have seen it. People landing on the moon.
Well, I've never seen the X Factor.
But you know, it was that had that. So, you know, I think it was being lit. First of all, it's being lit. I know you always see things as ends. You see things as ends. I don't. I never know where the end is. Very different. It's interesting.
How do you feel now about it?
That's interesting. That's interesting because like I don't know, because like most of the projects that I work on are not ended. You know, they're not like, you know, like the series, the long sort of period of pieces. But I have to have like a focus. I know I have to have like a focus. I'm very pragmatic, and I have to have a focus on things. So I have to have a focus on things that where I can imagine that there can be an ending.
Another question.
Yes.
Did you go out there purely for the pictures, or were you looking to meet these people and get to know them? Because I get the impression that if I was doing this, I probably would have just turned to Jenny, because I was hoping that some of these guys would be saying, "Oh, the whole thing was incredible, you know, it was a mind-blowing experience," but they didn't. They were quite hard about it. I'm just wondering if, when you set about to take the pictures, were you sort of secretly hoping to meet some celebrities, maybe?
I don't understand the word.
Okay, were you hoping that you were you fulfilling some sort of childhood dream as well?
Yes. Yeah, that's totally what I was doing, and the thing, you know, the thing is always like about, always about like, I mean, they're not celebrities. I mean, they're not. They're just like people who have done like a really significant thing. You know, they're really like, you know, they're really made. You know, they made this incredible mark on history, and like when Walt Cunningham said, like at the beginning of the film, that, you know, when people look back in 500 years, that this is going to be, I mean, like, I'm amazed that people can't, like, look, people talk about Columbus now, discovering America, but they don't talk about this passage in the same way. And the reason that is because we're just so close to it, you know, we're so close to it.
I think they were exposed at the beginning of celebrity, because they came back with this most amazing experience, the most amazing journey. And they come back and they would be taken from country to country, and in their line of duty they would have to shake 1 million hands and have 1 million dinners and have 1 million conversations with people about the same thing. And I think that was, no one really knew how to handle that at that time. And I think not only did their heads get pulled in one direction completely, but then in another, which is about being, you know, we all can't bear Christmas because of this overexposure of each other to each other sometimes. And so, you know, they had that for forever after.
Well, Christmas is all right around the turkey.
No, I know. I'm not being cynical about Christmas.
But it's just like having to walk down Regent Street in November and see all that stuff.
Yeah, I think I'm talking about, you know, losing sight of yourself. And I think that's why when they came back, some of them had quite extreme, reached out in very different ways, whether it was to look for faith or whether it was to look. We were talking about a guy the other day that lives in the middle of kind of nowhere. He's not in the film. He asked not to be filmed. The only one person that asked not to be filmed, and there are several others that are not in the film just because they didn't fit in the journey. But he particularly was interested as a physicist in levitation, and he was living with gurus, and he was trying to work out how we do it within ourselves, you know.
And telepathy as well.
Telepathy. And amazing experience, absolutely extraordinary.
He was on, oh, sure, was he? Oh, 16? Yeah, Apollo 16, I think. He walked on the moon, Ed Mitchell, and he was an amazing guy, and very brilliant in this one particular area, and he felt that that through telepathy, he became interested in telepathy, and he thought that he could make this connection with this person who was in, I forget where it was, it's like in Thailand or somewhere like that, but he just got the time wrong. So the time passage of time, so when he was like trying to like he was trying to like get into this head, the guy was like probably like, you know, eating a meal or something. It was like they got him at the wrong time, and then the guy tried to do it, and of course he was off somewhere else, and they just totally haven't like worked out just a practical like that, which is just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I love it.
Can't telepathy bend time? Do you
Well,
think you get late with telepathy? You had a question.
I'm working on that.
Yes, I would like to move a little bit away from the moon, okay? Because, yes, you made a film about them, but at the same time you also made a document about the dying art of black and white photography. You have at least 2 dialogues in the film,
at least
2 dialogues.
Right, yeah.
One with one of the first guys you talk with about the lenses and focal planes and focal depth. And then towards the end there is a guy who has a new digital camera. He proudly compares his camera to yours. Yeah. And so my question, it took about 100 years for people to refine the art of photography to focal depths. And now the analog photography is dead.
Well, it's not.
Well, it is not for people who love analog photography, but 99% of pictures taken commercially, publicly, and so on are with new digital cameras that don't have focus at all in the sense in which
Why do you think that is?
So, would you have any thoughts as to which direction non-focal or everything in focus kind of photography will take? Because they will have to discover a new kind of language.
But that's being discovered at the moment. And there are more and more people that are making images, and in lots of ways you kind of like, you know, you can look at it and you can say that you're completely saturated by it, but I continue to photograph in the same way, and I continue to photograph with the same camera that I started with, you know.
Yeah, this is clear.
30 years of working with this camera.
But my question is, what would you expect of everything in a focus camera would do to the objects of your photographs?
Well,
I think you're looking at it.
What you mean if I started to shoot digitally? You mean?
Yes. Imagine
it's
you
impossible.
shot any of them with the digital camera.
But it's impossible.
It would be the same.
No, it's impossible because I have this camera that I see and that I look, you know, that I look at the world through, and it's impossible for me to. I mean, it's really impossible for me to reformat it in any other kind of way. And so, I mean, I never realised for like a long time, but I'm obviously like.
Obsessive?
Yeah, completely obsessive, and like probably on a syndrome stuff that I never really understood when I was like at school, you know. I mean, but I'm like totally like I work things out in that way, and I was never really aware of that when I was like growing up, really at all. But why would somebody just shoot with the same camera for 30 years and not like, because it's like the extension of your arm in your eye, like it's just it's impossible.
Your choices.
It's impossible to shoot in another way. It doesn't when I look down and I look through it, you know. And also the other beautiful thing Peter, about the Rolleiflex is it's passive. You know, it's not like this is aggressive and this is passive when you shoot. And it's this totally significant thing, and it only really hit me like years and years and years later. You know, when I was, and why people react to what it is that you do. Yeah.
But I think we only make these strange machines because we are so desperate to share what the big pictures are going on in here that we absorb and interpret. And the way the whole brain is carrying information and telling stories. And so I think the machines that we're creating to get whatever's in here out, of course, have to become softer. You know, they're going to become something we can hardly imagine now how we're going to share our thoughts. You know, and
wow, and it's like 30 years.
anyway, it's a very, very exciting future for us to exchange. And there are very few things we can exchange on, and that have a tangibility. And the photograph is one of those things. The beauty of it. Any more questions?
If you could summarise sort of how you define the characters that you met, because they've obviously all been through this prism of experience, the shared experience, but they've also started at different points and ended at different points. How would you say is there a defining characteristic or type of such of an astronaut who's been to the moon?
I think it's the same as you all being here in the room because you've got an interest in something. There are all these different kinds of things that join people together. The astronauts were an extraordinary group of people at an extraordinary time. The minds in that room at Mission Control were some of the brightest minds of our time. Unfortunately, they weren't wide enough in their vision. You know, there weren't very many women in there. But all the same, that kind of focus of incredible intelligence and energy, and smoking fags, eating pizza, staying up all night, just thinking about where we're going, took us on a very interesting journey. And I think the cynicism, you know, that kind of went on past 20 years, and people would talk about is, did it really happen?
Or Star Wars.
You know, and all the terrible stuff they're doing up on the moon right now, like putting lots of weapons up there and they're pointing them back at us. You know, we all know that there's a greater, you know, search, place, maybe explorations we can have. I think that's what's really exciting. I think every single one of us in the room knows that. It's a question of how you can make your life move towards that in some way. So I go make my funny film. You take pictures. You know, we all do something as well as we can.
I thought it was really interesting to talk about camera and sort of moving there into the role flex and passive. And you know, the opposite about being aggressive.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you could expand on that a little bit more.
Well, it's just, if you think of like, it was kind of like the gesture, you know, like this. I mean, it sort of explains it all. I never really felt right about like pointing. I never felt right about like saying taking a picture. I always thought it was giving a picture. So I never felt right about, you know, I always thought that it was something that I could share and I could like put out, and that's what it's kind of always about. And this thing is, well, you know, in just the way that in just your gesture, you know, is passive. And the whole idea of a lot of the time, the whole way that photography is described as like taking a picture is aggressive. And I don't believe that it is. I think it's all about like giving.
It's also interesting that you put something here and all the signals at your face, that
you lose your face.
Change is lost. You're behind it. So I think that's quite a significant.
Well, I never understood that. I mean, I never really understood that for years and years and years and years and years. It was just like you know, just like living with that camera, you know, living with that, you know, that piece of equipment.
That funny little box. Italian for a room, isn't it?
Yeah.
Camera.
What camera did you use to shoot the film?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, tiny little thing. One of the first chip cameras. I've just done a documentary on the artist Rachel Whiteread, one of the first little digital films. And I had to be in very tight spaces and when big board meetings, lots of conflict going on. So I knew I had to stay well out of the thing, and it was just wonderful because before that, you know, these stupid great man cameras up here, and you know, you talk to every cameraman, they've got busted backs and funny walks, and this wonderful little digital camera that allows such intimacy. I mean, it doesn't give you the greatest quality in the world, but I really don't worry about quality in the sense that, you know, if you've got a pencil, you can draw and make marks. And so for me, it's not about the quality, it's actually about being in a place where it isn't clicking and whirring, and you're right back and it's part of you. Part of you. Almost like you're not in the way with it. It's the same as with your thing, sort of similar.
Yeah, it's like an extension of your, like what I say, it's like an extension of...
I would love to have the operation. I want the operation to happen.
A few more years.
So I can,
you never know.
Because then I can replay it and it won't be
What a horrible idea.
The worst thing
everything you see.
The worst thing about memories is you just bloody forget all the time.
And then if that physicist comes with telepathy, you won't have to make films at all. You'll just telepathically transmit everything that you want.
Oh, it's a horrible idea. Man.
It's a fantastic idea.
And the last thing that is needed is just eliminate Homo sapiens and then really replace technological role.
I think it's important that you've got like, I think it's important that you've got certain things that are, you know, you've got certain things that you can just like place in memory. They don't have to be, you know, I worried for years and years and years. I even worried about things that, before I was a photographer, things that I'd seen when I first traveled around America and I wasn't a photographer. And like, I mean, amazing things I saw, but then I realized that I saw in the perspective of photography that it was like, it was supposed to have happened, you know, so it's, now I worry less about that. I don't think you have to record everything.
I think you've got time for one more question.
Just a short one.
A short one.
Just a little one.
A little question. Over there.
I just wondered, were there any other moments whilst you were travelling around that you wanted to, that were a completely different subject from the astronauts as you were travelling around America that you wanted to photograph? So...
Right. But no, because I was completely, because I'm very focused and I was very focused on like this particular body of work, and at that time that was it. I mean, the only way you can go, I mean, how many days was that? Like,
I've seen you stop and do roadkill.
Okay, yeah, so we probably stopped and did roadkill.
If you see something, it does.
Oh yeah, okay, that's true.
There is always the periphery vision.
That's right.
But when you're so focused, it's almost as if you can't remember it. But I
don't remember
I know
it,
that
that's true.
It's constant, that seeing of moments.
You can't stop looking, you know. You can't.
No, it's a lovely feeling, enhanced looking. It's gorgeous. Anyway.
And roadkill's great. Because you stare right into the wound then. Fine.
On that note, thank you for all coming. And thanks to Steve and Nichola.
Thank you.